The year is 1912. The air inside Villa Mondragone, an ancient Jesuit college nestled in the hills near Rome, seems thick with the weight of centuries. Long, silent corridors, where sunlight filters only through high, narrow windows, are coated in a layer of time's dust that no broom could ever sweep away. Beneath the soaring vaulted ceilings, even footsteps become hushed, as if afraid to disturb the ghosts of long-dead scholars. This is a forgotten world, an archive of old knowledge awaiting the final judgment of time. And in this world, Wilfrid Voynich felt right at home. He was more than just an antique book dealer. To those who knew him, Voynich was a complex figure. A Polish revolutionary who had once escaped a Siberian prison. A man with a fervent passion for the secrets of the past. His eyes, behind round spectacles, had the ability to see past old leather and yellowed pages to find the true value, the hidden story. On that day, he came to Villa Mondragone at the invitation of the Jesuits. The college was in financial trouble and needed to sell a portion of its old manuscript collection. Amidst the familiar religious texts, the Bibles and philosophical treatises in Latin, Voynich browsed with a professional respect but little excitement. He was searching for something different. An echo from a unique mind that history had overlooked. And then he found it. It lay in an old chest, a small, unassuming book with no title on its leather spine, no author's name. From the first touch, he felt something was different. When he opened the cover, a jolt of shock ran down his spine. This was not Latin, not Greek, Hebrew, or any language he had ever seen in his entire career. The vellum pages were covered in handwritten script. The characters, written with a fluid and elegant hand, seemed to dance across the page, forming distinct words and sentences. But they were utterly alien, a mysterious alphabet that seemed to belong to no known culture. But what truly stunned him were the illustrations. They were meticulously drawn, with colors that remained vibrant after centuries. The first section of the book was filled with hundreds of drawings of plants, but these were not species a botanist could recognize. Some looked as if someone had taken the roots of one plant, fused them with the stem of another, and topped them with the flower of a third. They were at once familiar and disturbingly alien. Voynich turned the pages. The next section was filled with complex astronomical and astrological charts, concentric circles, suns and moons with human faces, strange constellations that corresponded to no known star map. And then he reached the strangest part. Dozens of pages were devoted to detailed drawings of nude women, often in groups, bathing or wading in pools of green water. These pools were not natural ponds. They were connected by an intricate system of tubes and structures that looked bizarrely like internal human organs, magnified. The drawings were not erotic, but had a clinical, enigmatic quality, as if depicting some incomprehensible ritual or medical procedure. Wilfrid Voynich closed the book. His heart was pounding. With his vast experience, he knew this was no joke or meaningless diary. The sophistication, the consistency of the writing system, and the quality of the illustrations showed that this was the product of an extraordinary mind. A project in which immense time and effort had been invested. This was a cipher, a lost language, or something else entirely. It was a door to a world of sealed knowledge. He knew he had to have it. After some negotiation, he purchased the book along with a few other manuscripts. From that moment, his life became intertwined with it. He hadn't just bought an antique. He had inherited a mission, a 600-year-old puzzle. The case of the Voynich Manuscript had officially begun, and Wilfrid Voynich, the revolutionary and secret hunter, had become its first detective. He did not know that he was only the first in a long line of the greatest minds who would try and fail to solve this mystery. A mystery that would defy the most brilliant codebreakers and the most powerful supercomputers of a century yet to come. After acquiring the book, Wilfrid Voynich became its first detective. He didn't just store it as a precious antique. He began an obsessive investigation. He photographed every page, sending copies to linguistic experts, botanists, and historians across Europe and America, hoping someone might recognize a character, a drawing, a single clue. But from all corners, the response he received was one of baffled silence. No one had ever seen anything like it. Realizing that direct decipherment was a dead end, Voynich shifted to another investigative method, tracing its provenance. If he couldn't read the book, perhaps he could find out who wrote it, or at least who had owned it. A centuries-old cold case needed a lead, a starting point. And that lead had been inside the book all along. Tucked between the first few pages was an old piece of vellum, a letter yellowed with age. The handwritten script, though faded, was still clear. The letter was dated August 19, 1665, or 1666. The last digit was hard to read. This was the Rosetta Stone of the investigation. A door creaking open into the manuscript's mysterious past. The letter's author was Johannes Marcus Marci, a physician, scientist, and rector of Charles University in Prague. He was one of the leading intellects of his time. And the recipient was even more famous, Athanasius Kircher, a Jesuit scholar in Rome. To anyone studying 17th century knowledge, the name Athanasius Kircher carries a special weight. He was known as the master of 100 arts, an encyclopedic mind who could write books on every subject, from geology, medicine, and music to Egyptology. Kircher was famous throughout Europe for his claim to have successfully deciphered Egyptian hieroglyphs, a claim later proven false, but it built his formidable reputation. If there was one person in the 17th century thought capable of deciphering a mysterious text, it was Kircher. He was the Sherlock Holmes of his era. In the letter, Marci wrote with deep respect, imploring Kircher to use his extraordinary intellect to solve these sphinx-like riddles. He explained that the book had once belonged to a close friend of his, a little-known alchemist in Prague named Georg Baresch. Georg Baresch, as Marci recounted, was the first recorded detective in this case. He had owned the book for years and was obsessed with it. He believed it contained invaluable medical or alchemical knowledge, but he had spent his life trying to read it in vain. Baresch was the first to realize that this was not random scribbling, but an intentional system. He had copied a few pages and sent them to Kircher in Rome for help, but apparently received no reply. After Baresch's death, Marci inherited the book, and now he was sending the entire manuscript to Kircher, hoping the great scholar could succeed where his friend had failed. But Marci's letter revealed an even more crucial detail, a clue that led the investigation further back in time, to one of the most mystical and eccentric courts in Europe. Marci wrote that, according to his late friend, the book had once been purchased by the Holy Roman Emperor Rudolf II. Emperor Rudolf II, who reigned in Prague in the late 16th century, was no ordinary king. He cared little for politics or war. His entire court was a world unto itself, a center of alchemy, astrology, magic, and esoteric knowledge. He spent enormous sums to attract the most brilliant alchemists, astrologers, and talented charlatans from all over Europe to Prague, hoping to find the philosopher's stone that could turn base metals into gold. According to Marci, Rudolf II had bought the Voynich Manuscript for an incredible price, 600 gold ducats. To put that in perspective, it was enough money to buy a large country estate at the time. And the reason he paid such a price was his belief that its author was none other than Roger Bacon. Roger Bacon, a 13th century English friar and philosopher, was an almost legendary figure, a man centuries ahead of his time, who was said to have predicted the microscope, telescope, automobile, and airplane. Attributing the authorship to Bacon transformed the book from a mysterious object into a holy grail of forbidden knowledge. Wilfrid Voynich's investigation now had a chain of ownership, albeit one with many gaps. From the supposed author Roger Bacon in the 13th century, to the mystical court of Rudolf II in Prague in the late 16th century, then to the alchemist Georg Barisch, followed by the scientist Marcus Marci, and finally to Athanasius Kircher in Rome in 1665. After that, the book seemed to have disappeared into the Jesuit archives for over 200 years, until Voynich found it. The cold trail was slowly warming up. Marci's letter not only authenticated the manuscript's age, but also placed it in a dramatic historical context. It was not the product of a reclusive monk, but had seemingly passed through the hands of the most curious and powerful minds. But it also raised a disturbing question. If Athanasius Kircher, the greatest decoder of his time, had received the book, why was there no record of him ever deciphering it? Kircher's silence was more daunting than any cipher. It implied that the Sherlock Holmes of the 17th century had faced a case that even he could not solve. The mystery deepened. The book was not just a puzzle. It was a challenge that had defeated the leading intellects of the past. And now, in the 20th century, it awaited a new generation of detectives, armed with tools and knowledge that Marci and Kircher could never have dreamed of. The real showdown was just beginning. The 20th century was an age of world wars and unbreakable codes. In this global battle of wits, where the fate of nations could be decided by an intercepted message, codebreakers became silent warriors, unsung heroes. And in the pantheon of these heroes, two names were revered above all others: William and Elizabeth Friedman. They were the royal couple of American cryptology. William Friedman, a geneticist turned codebreaker, was the genius who led the team that broke Japan's Purple Code, an achievement credited with significantly shortening World War II. Elizabeth, his wife, was a legend in her own right. She had single-handedly dismantled alcohol smuggling rings during Prohibition, and later, Nazi spy rings in South America. Simply by looking at meaningless numbers and letters and finding the hidden order within. For them, no code was unbreakable. Only codes for which there had not yet been enough time. In the late 1940s, as the world was slowly healing, Wilfrid Voynich, and later his widow who inherited the manuscript, brought the book to the best minds he could find. And no one was better than the Friedmans. The showdown had begun. On one side, the couple who had defeated the most complex encryption machines of the Axis powers. On the other, a 600-year-old book, silent and mysterious. William Friedman formed an informal study group, the first Voynich Manuscript Study Group, FSG, gathering experts from the military and academia. They began their work with professional confidence. They had a process, a method proven in the crucible of war. They started with the most basic step of cryptanalysis, frequency analysis. They carefully transcribed each character, counting the occurrences of each symbol, each pair, each triplet. In any language or simple cipher, some letters appear more frequently than others, for example, E in English. By finding these frequency patterns, they could begin to make educated guesses. But the Voynich manuscript resisted them from the very first step. It had frequency patterns, certainly. Some characters appeared more often than others, just like in a real language. It obeyed Zipf's law, a statistical rule that describes the frequency of words in natural languages. This suggested it was not random gibberish. There was a structure, an order. But when they tried to apply simple substitution ciphers, e.g., assigning a Voynich character to a Latin letter, the result was only nonsense. They tried more complex methods. Was it a polyalphabetic cipher, like the Vigenère cipher, where each character could represent multiple different letters? They tested it. The result was still nonsense. Did it use nulls, meaningless characters inserted to confuse? They tried to filter them out. Still no result. The group's initial confidence slowly turned to confusion, then to sheer frustration. The manuscript seemed to be mocking them. It behaved exactly like a language, but it could not be broken like a cipher. Some words were repeated multiple times, sometimes 3 or 4 times in a row, an extremely rare feature in any known language. Some characters only appeared at the beginning of words, some only at the end, suggesting rules for prefixes and suffixes. But those rules seemed to lead nowhere. Elizabeth Friedman, with her sharp intuition, felt something was fundamentally wrong. She sensed they were not just facing a cipher, but something entirely different in nature. After years of relentless effort, William Friedman, the man who had seen through the darkest military secrets of his enemies, had to admit defeat. But in that defeat, he arrived at a conclusion more astonishing than any solution. In a letter to a colleague, he wrote that he believed the Voynich Manuscript could not be deciphered by conventional means, because it might not be a cipher in the traditional sense at all. He proposed a bold hypothesis. This could be a very early attempt to create an artificial or philosophical language. The author, according to Friedman, might have tried to construct an entirely new language from scratch, with its own grammar and vocabulary, designed to classify knowledge about the world in a logical way. If this were true, then the author of the Voynich Manuscript was not just a cryptographer. He was a J.R.R. Tolkien, or an L.L. Zamenhof, the creator of Esperanto of the Middle Ages, a mind centuries ahead of his time. And without a Rosetta Stone to translate that language, it would remain forever unreadable. The Friedman's failure elevated the Voynich Manuscript from a historical puzzle to a legend in the world of cryptology. It was the Mount Everest that no one could conquer. Other titans also tried and failed. John Tiltman, another veteran British codebreaker from Bletchley Park, where Germany's Enigma code was broken, also studied it and came to no conclusion. Prescott Currier, a U.S. Navy analyst, made a crucial discovery. By analyzing the handwriting styles, he determined that the manuscript appeared to have been written by at least two different people, using two slightly different dialects, which he named Voynich A and Voynich B. This only deepened the mystery. The 20th century, with all the analytical power of the human intellect, could not subdue the 600-year-old book. It had defeated the best. The showdown had ended in a decisive victory for silence. But a new generation of detectives was about to emerge. A generation made not of flesh and blood, but of silicon and algorithms. The investigation was about to enter the computer age, and the Voynich Manuscript awaited its next opponent. The 20th century ended, and with it, the era of codebreakers hunched over desks with pencils and frequency tables. The Voynich Manuscript, having defeated the sharpest human minds, now faced a new kind of intelligence, artificial intelligence. The ancient book was brought into the digital world. Each vellum page was scanned at incredibly high resolution. Every character, every ink stroke was converted into data, into zeros and ones, ready to be fed into the silicon brains of supercomputers. The investigation had moved from the library to the server room. One of the first digital detectives was Greg Kondrak, a computer scientist at the University of Alberta, Canada. He and his team approached the case not with intuition, but with the power of statistics and algorithms. They could do in seconds what Friedman's group took months to do: analyze the entire text, map the relationships between characters, and search for hidden grammatical rules. The computers confirmed what earlier codebreakers had suspected. This text was not gibberish. It had a complex and consistent structure. But the computers went further. Using artificial intelligence, Kondrak's team conducted a bold experiment in 2018. They trained an AI to analyze the linguistic patterns in the manuscript and compare them against hundreds of different languages. After processing millions of possibilities, the AI came up with a startling hypothesis. The original language of the manuscript might be ancient Hebrew, but it wasn't written normally. The AI suggested the author had used an encryption method called an alphagram, a form of anagram where the letters of a word are reordered alphabetically and the vowels are dropped. This was a promising lead. For the first time, a plausible method had been proposed. The research team tried to apply their algorithm to translate the first sentence in the herbal section. The result, after being interpreted by Hebrew experts, seemed to be: "She made recommendations to the priest, man of the house, and me, and people. The sentence was a bit clunky, but it made sense. A wave of excitement spread through the Voynich research community. Was this the breakthrough they had been waiting for a century? But the excitement quickly faded. When the method was applied to the rest of the text, the results became disjointed and nonsensical. It turned out that the AI, with its superhuman ability to find patterns, may have found ghost patterns, random coincidences that looked like an intentional system. The machine had found a clue, but it may have been just an illusion in a sea of data. Meanwhile, at Yale University's Voynich Rare Book Manuscript Library, where the manuscript is carefully preserved, another kind of forensic examination was taking place. Conservators used multispectral imaging technology. By shining different types of light, from ultraviolet to infrared, onto the pages, they hoped to find what the naked eye could not see. Erased text, hidden notes under the drawings, or different layers of ink. It was like using a high-tech forensic lamp to search for hidden traces. The result? Nothing significant. The author did not seem to be hiding anything under the text. The text itself was the ultimate secret. The investigation even went down to the molecular level. Scientists attempted to extract DNA from the vellum pages. Their goal was not to read the book, but to identify the animal species, likely calfskin, and potentially trace its genetic origin to a specific geographical region in 15th century Europe. It was a creative attempt to narrow down the crime scene. And then, with the rise of large language models, LLM's powerful AIs, like Myself the Investigation, entered a new and paradoxical phase. Researchers could teach an AI to read the entire Voynich manuscript. The AI could learn the rules of Voynich keys. It could recognize prefixes, suffixes, and sentence structures. It could even generate new sentences of its own that looked identical to those in the manuscript, obeying all the grammatical rules it had learned. But here was the incredible paradox. The AI could write in Voynich keys, but it could not understand it. The machine could perfectly mimic the syntax, structure of the language, but it was completely unable to grasp the semantics, meaning. It was like someone who could perfectly copy the notes of a symphony without knowing anything about music. The digital age, with all its computational power and artificial intelligence, has brought us closer than ever to understanding how the manuscript works. We know with near certainty that it is not random scribbling. There is a complex and consistent system behind it. But the core mystery, what does it mean, remains as elusive as the day Wilfrid Voynich first opened the book. The machines, like the humans before them, had run into a silent brick wall. The investigation had reached a strange point where we could describe the shape of the key in exquisite detail, but still could not find the lock it belongs to. Now, with all investigative methods seemingly exhausted, all that remains are the theories, a lineup of potential suspects for this 600-year-old case. The investigation has reached a peculiar point. Every method, from historical analysis and classical cryptology to artificial intelligence, has failed to produce a definitive answer. Like detectives standing before a locked room with no signs of forced entry, all they have left is deduction. It is time to profile the culprit, the mind that created this mystery, by examining the main hypotheses, the potential suspects in this 600-year-old case. The first profile that emerges is that of a brilliant cryptographer, a master of concealment. According to this theory, the author wrote a meaningful text in a common language, perhaps Latin or an Italian dialect, and then encrypted it with a complex system to hide its contents. The history of Renaissance Europe is filled with ciphers used for political, scientific, and alchemical purposes, and the existence of statistical rules in the text seems to strongly support this idea. But if so, why was it so complex? Even the codebreakers who cracked Enigma could not find the key. Strange features like the repetition of words in sequence are unlike any known cipher. If this is a cipher, it must be a unique system, perhaps created by a spy or an alchemist, trying to protect forbidden knowledge from the eyes of the Inquisition. Another profile paints a completely different picture. that of the last member of a forgotten culture. This hypothesis suggests that Voynichese is not a code, but a real, perhaps extinct, natural language, written in a self-invented alphabet. The vocabulary and syntax structure of the text are very similar to those of natural languages, and some researchers have pointed to statistical similarities with languages from Asia or Central America. In this scenario, the author could have been a traveler, a merchant, or the last member of a lost culture, trying to record the knowledge of their people before it vanished forever. But the question remains, if this was a natural language, why is there no other text in the world that uses this writing system? Of course, there is always a darker possibility, a profile of deception. Perhaps the entire book is just an elaborate hoax, a string of meaningless gibberish cleverly arranged to look like a real text. The historical context fits perfectly. Emperor Rudolf II was a credulous man, willing to spend enormous sums on mystical objects. A talented fraudster could have created this book to sell to him. The non-existent plants and unreadable text might simply be because they have no meaning at all. But this theory also has a major flaw. Why go to such elaborate lengths? To create a hoax, one does not need to construct a text with such complex statistical structure that it fools modern cryptographers and AI. Creating rule-based gibberish seems even harder than writing a simple cipher. This leads us to the profile that William Friedman himself sketched, that of a thinker ahead of his time. According to his hypothesis, this is not a cipher, but an artificial language. The author was not hiding an existing language, but inventing a completely new one. Perhaps an early attempt to create a universal philosophical language to classify knowledge. This is an elegant idea, explaining both the complex structure and the indecipherability of the manuscript, but it also requires an extraordinary intellectual leap for someone living in the 15th century. Finally, we have the strangest profile, one that delves into the realm of psychology and neurology. Perhaps the author was a mystic, someone in a state of religious ecstasy, and the text is a form of glossolalia, the phenomenon of speaking or writing in tongues. According to this hypothesis, the writer was not consciously aware of what they were writing, but simply transcribing sequences of characters they believed to be divine messages. This could explain the fluency of the script, but it struggles to explain the consistent and complex system maintained over more than 200 pages. After considering all the suspects, the investigation still cannot issue a final indictment. Each profile has plausible elements, but also fatal flaws. The book remains, challenging us. It could be the work of any of these culprits, or it could be something that we, with our 21st century mindset, cannot yet even imagine. The case remains open. The investigation has reached its end. After more than a century, after passing through dusty libraries in Rome, mystical courts in Prague, top-secret wartime code-breaking rooms, and modern server farms, we have come back to where we started. A silent book. The greatest minds, from Athanasius Kircher to William Friedman, have faced it and failed. The most powerful machines, with the ability to perform billions of calculations per second, have analyzed it and returned only confusion. We have dated the vellum, analyzed the composition of the ink, and mapped the statistics of every character. We know when it was made, where it has been, and who might have touched it. But the most important question, the core question, what does it say, remains a vast, empty space. The case remains open. No final verdict can be delivered. But perhaps this failure is the true legacy of the Voynich Manuscript. It is more than just a book. It has become a symbol, a mirror, reflecting the limits of human understanding. In an age where we can decode the genome, photograph black holes, and send robots to Mars, this 600-year-old book is a humble reminder that there are still mysteries that can resist all our efforts. It is an impregnable fortress of silence. Its allure lies not just in the mystery, but in what it evokes in us. It challenges our definitions of language, of knowledge, and of history. It forces us to confront incredible possibilities, a lost language, a genius cipher, an elaborate hoax, or a window into a mind completely different from our own. Let us return to the final image. A vellum page, carefully lit in the conservation vault of the Voynich Library. The strange characters seem to dance under the light, as vivid as if they were written yesterday. They are telling a story. We know it. We can feel the structure, the rhythm, and the intention behind them. But we cannot hear the voice. The book holds its secret, perhaps forever. And we, the viewers, the detectives of the 21st century, can only look on and wonder. Are we looking at the key to a lost knowledge? An encyclopedia of a world we never knew existed? Or are we simply admiring the most elaborate and enduring joke in human history? The answer is still waiting, in silence, on 600-year-old vellum pages. And perhaps, the fact that we can never be sure is what makes it immortal. Thank you for taking the time to listen and to watch today's story. And of course, as always, a massive thank you. Thank you to everyone who supports the Science Stories channel. Whether you just watch the videos, leave a comment with your own theory, or share this story with others. I truly appreciate that contribution. The world is full of mysteries, waiting to be explored. Always keep an open mind and never stop questioning. I wish you all the best, and I'll see you in the next episode.